Not again. So this year's Met Gala happened on Monday, May 6th, with the dress code theme being the Garden of Time. And here we are, yet again, talking about Kim Kardashian, her sartorial tomfoolery, and the public discourse almost exactly 2 years to the day after her whole Marilyn Monroe dress disaster.
Using words like, we're stewards of this dress, and the utmost care was taken in the conservation and presentation of this dress. That's all a bunch of bull. Just so we're clear. If they were an actual legit museum, it wouldn't see the light of day. Kim's request would have been sent to the spam folder. This dress would never have been worn.
Now, while she didn't destroy a priceless gown for the sake of headlines this year, that dishonor is bestowed onto Chloe Sevigny and this absolute dumpster fire.
Well, it's Delora. As you may have expected. Yes, we're giving all reconstructed Victorian ornaments.
Kim has once again thrown the internet into a tizzy about her tight-laced waist. And before we get into this, I do want to make something extremely clear. We can have this conversation about Kim Kardashian, corsetry, and tight lacing without 1, body shaming, okay? And 2, slut shaming. Like, I don't want to hear in the comments, all right? If you cannot have a conversation and talk about the subject without insulting Kim in that way, then you really honestly don't need to be having that conversation. Like, we can talk about this like adults, including critiquing Kim's choices, without being unnecessarily derogatory about her appearance or her personal life. Discussing bodies, especially body modification, corsetry, and weight, needs to be done with respect, not only to the subject at hand, but to other people who are participating in this conversation. Let's just keep our adult pants on and have an adult conversation here, all right?
You started it! No, I didn't! Hey, you kids! Be nice, or so help me, I will turn this car around!
Now, the other thing I want to make clear is that tight lacing is ultimately subjective. After reading literally a pile of primary sources about tight lacing throughout the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, I can confidently tell you that what qualifies as tight lacing is subjective, because bodies are different and it's a very personal experience. So what might seem extreme to one person is comfortable for another. However, as a general rule, vanity tight lacing, which is what we're discussing here today, means that the person is lacing down beyond the point of comfort. And that usually does entail about 3 inches or more in reduction at the waist. And with that in mind, I also want to remind everyone that this is not Kim's first rodeo, okay, into tight lacing. Girl's done it before, several times. She is someone that I would actually qualify as a regular tight lacer when she is wearing corsetry. She obviously likes the way it looks. She likes the way her body looks when she's tight laced. And it is very clear that any sort of lack of comfort or mobility, especially when she's attending the Met Gala, is fine with her if she is tight-laced. Now, what is fascinating for me is how people are freaking out about this online, like right now, as if this is something new or shocking. And what that discourse actually says about modern and historical corset wearing. Listen, there's nothing better than crawling into a comfy bed after spending a long night judging the ultra-rich on the internet. And the best mattress for this post-Met Gala fatigue is by far and away made by Birch. I have had a Birch mattress for a few years now, and frankly, I'm obsessed with it. And when my anxiety isn't waking me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, imagining like nightmare scenarios with planes crashing, the earth burning down, and everything going to hell in a handbasket. Anyways, you know, 3 a.m. stuff, no big deal. I get a great night's sleep, like the dead. I love my Birch mattress because Birch makes their mattresses out of organic wool, organic cotton, and American spring steel, and natural latex, which provides like the perfect amount of support, so like you never wake up stiff or sore. They're also GOTS certified organic, Green Guard Gold certified, Fair Trade, and Forest Stewardship Council certified. The mattresses are much better for you and for the environment than the other options that are out on the market today. And there's no fiberglass. If you are in the market for a new mattress, I highly, genuinely recommend investing in a Birch mattress. Their Memorial Day sale is happening now. You'll get 20% off a Birch mattress plus 2 free Eco Rust pillows. So you can go to birchliving.com/AbbyCox to start shopping and learn more about the sale. Now, as with all Birch mattress purchases, you will get a 100-night sleep trial as well as a 25-year warranty. So just click the link in the description below, scan the QR code, or just go to birchliving.com/AbbyCox to get a great deal on a fantastic mattress. And I also just want to say a quick thank you to Birch for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to talking about Kim, corsets, Victorian, and I'll get back to taking a nap. You. Part 1. What was she thinking? Now, say what you want about Kim and the Kardashians, but the one thing you cannot say, that they're stupid, especially Kim. Just like with the Marilyn Monroe dress disaster, that woman knew exactly what she was doing by tight lacing for the Met Gala this year. She wanted press, and she wanted a lot of it, and she is getting it. And am I feeding into this media beast? Yeah, absolutely I am. But she's also helping me out unintentionally, because I am literally working on my book about women's relationship with corsetry throughout the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries right now. And the chapter that I am literally working on is about why we love to hate corsets and the link to our modern confusion between tight lacing and normal corset wearing and historical documentation.
Like pain. Try wearing a corset.
So Kim is quite literally a walking, barely, example of what I'm actually currently writing about. This discourse happening here is just academic gold for me. Kim is wearing a custom Maison Margiela look that features a, quote, corset made from an 18th century antique brocade fabric, rewoven in a jacquard of silver threads, and an exfoliage skirt hand-wired in a filigrating, which is supposedly a new filigree and metalworking technique developed by Maison Margiela. Look, I don't know, guys, okay? Like, I read this caption on Instagram like several times, and each time it made me feel like I was having a stroke. So do with that information what you will. I don't know. It honestly just looks like word salad on Maison Margiela's Instagram page right now. Anyways, to continue. It is this filigrating technique of silver metal formations of lace, flowers, leaves, and sprigs, interlinked with silver chain and floral motifs cut from mirror fragments and bedecked with crystal pendants, pearls, and clasped jewelry. Blah, what a mouthful. According to Maison Margiela, it was inspired by Elizabeth Taylor and her love of jewelry, or in Kim's words,
running out, my dress is falling off because it was one of those nights, and I just grabbed my boyfriend's sweater.
I don't know, guys. Now, the entire look took over 1,000 hours to create, which is impressive and sounds impressive, but it is also pretty standard for this sort of couture level event.
2,800,000 beads just on the dress alone. It took 20 people 5,000 hours to work on this look.
Wow.
70 people worked on it, so I'm just so honored to be here presenting this for them.
And Kim, you know, the look, it really didn't sit right with me, like something was off. And when I originally scripted this video, I had one thought in my mind as I was writing it, but now after reviewing this video that Vogue just released yesterday, I am honestly a bit torn about what happened. Earlier this year, Maison Margiela had an incredible runway show that rocked fashion and makeup worlds. And I actually talked about the historical influences throughout that show in this video if you haven't seen it already. Corsetry was fundamental to the show. The team at Maison Margiela have proven themselves excellent corset makers with a deep understanding of how to corset diverse bodies, pattern, fit, proportion, and how to harness the incredible optical illusions through the balance of corsetry and padding, which, by the way, have always worked together. Corsets are often padded about the waist and hips so as to give the parts a rounded look. Also, even the padding which ladies use to give a full appearance where there is a deficient of bosom is sure in a little time to entirely destroy all the natural beauty of the parts. Now, this lady is a little bit wackadoo about padding out the bust, but that's beside the point. This quote at least demonstrates how common padding out your corset was, which honestly is the biggest take home for our purposes today. The team at Maison Margiela know how to make a corset that fits. They know how to give the illusion of a smaller waist than what is actually there and create a corset that men and women can move in. We saw this on the runway show with the type of walk and the artistic movements that the models displayed, but we can also see this on the other Maison Margiela looks that were at the Met Gala, specifically Gwendolyn Christie's look, as well as what Ariana Grande wore to perform at the Met. Both of these women were able to do their jobs, which were hosting and singing, while wearing Maison Margiela corsetry. But when we look at Kim, it looks like something is wrong, and that she's not wearing her corset correctly. Now, she has tight-laced herself down well past the point of what appears to be outwardly comfortable, and at least to me, how that corset is supposed to fit. And when we compare video footage of her on the carpet to Victorian writings about tight lacing, Kim unintentionally became a walking example of everything that people complained about in the Victorian era. When we look at the back of the corset, we see two things. The most obvious being that they attempted to lace the corset shut. I do not think that this is how the garment was supposed to originally fit. The other is you can see that the corset is touching at the top, and it is just presumably touching at the hips as well, but it's bowing slightly at the waist, maybe a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch at the gala. It's hard to say. Now, looking at the footage from the couture runway shows, we actually see a variation of lacing space with the corsets. Some corsets almost touch, maybe like a 1/2 inch gap or so, and then some actually look like they could be upwards to 2 or 3 inches of space. All of these corsets do seem to be evenly laced and spaced throughout, and that there is no bowing, there's no visible tension on the models. And this is fundamental in a properly fitting corset. A corset should be large enough to be evenly laced with a space of about 3 inches between the sides at the back. But it must be remembered that it should not be just too tight to bring it to this space, or it will not be a well-fitting one. Just as a little side note, a lot of modern corset makers seem to believe that corsets should have a very small gap in the back, or like they should touch. So that small gap for Maison Margiela isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just probably a possible reflection of a modern corset making practice versus like a true historical practice, which is totally fine. Like, it's not a big deal. But we know that Kim's corset was not meant to be laced that way because of that uneven spacing. And I have a really hard time accepting that the makers at Maison Margiela would have intentionally patterned the corset to do that. That bowing at the waist tells us that something changed in the fit and ended up different than what the team at Maison Margiela probably envisioned. Now, it could be that either Kim gained just like a little bit of weight, making it harder to lace the corset closed at her waist, or it could be that the corset was originally patterned with a 1 inch or so gap in the back, and she pushed to have it laced tighter. While originally I wanted to fully place the blame on Kim and her dressers on the day of the event for this whole thing, when reviewing the Vogue video of the final dress rehearsal, we learned a lot more about that corset. The first thing we learned is that corset is long, and it goes well below her hip bones and completely covers her pelvis. We can see a slight bulging of the flesh where the corset is pushing slightly into her hips and thighs. And again, this tells me that they've pulled the corset just a little bit tighter than how it was really truly meant to fit. But it's not that bad. Like, it's like, this is minutia that we're talking about here. There doesn't seem to be any padding built into the corset itself, though she does have really thick pantyhose on. So it's possible that she added padding under there, or that could also just be her body. During the Maison Margiela runway show, they did add silicone prosthetics to the models in a way that was so seamless, you couldn't actually really tell what was real or fake. So either way, that corset is long and it was patterned to fit smoothly over her hips and butt. That is really impressive corset patterning, guys. I really want to make that clear. The corset makers and the pattern drafters really knew what they were doing. Next is that in the fitting video, we can see the bowing. It's happening there too. They're lacing the corset a little bit differently for this fitting. For example, that lacing knot is out and visible where it's not visible during the gala, but the bowing at the center back is obvious. While it is not in the video, like we don't get to watch this interaction, at some point they decided to lace down tighter, resulting in the loss of an even gap in the back. It's here that I can't help but assume that Kim must have requested that they tight lace the corset more.
I'll feel so snatched I won't even be able to communicate to you how snatched I feel.
And just kind of disregarded how it was intended to be originally laced. And John Galliano consented to this decision. This means that she made a conscious decision to wear the corset tighter than what it had been intended. It is also possible that she went tighter at the waist for the event. Now, while the angles are different, you guys are welcome to disagree with me on this. Like, I'm not even sure I agree with myself on this. This is just a plausibility. In the fitting, it looks like the gap is closer to having about a 1 inch space or so, like at her waist, where at the gala it looks to be a little bit closer to a 1/2 inch. When you are tight lacing, even a 1/4 of an inch makes a huge difference in appearance and comfort. Like a huge difference. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really is a lot, guys. Like, it's a lot. Arguably, Kim opted to go tighter during the event the night of to help just kind of cause an internet ruckus, and she did it successfully. Because of this, she obviously had trouble breathing.
How's the breathing? How's it going?
It's an art form. but I got it.
And to me, at least, it looks like she's winded the whole time on the carpet. I also want to point out that tight lacing does not always result in difficulty breathing. If there is enough room built into the upper part of the corset, so up here, it actually is really easy to lace down several inches at the waist beyond the standard 1 to 3 and still have plenty of room to breathe. I do it in my Edwardian corsets when they actually have that sort of room. But this corset that I have on, this is not a corset that's meant to be tight laced at all. Like, it is actually pretty, as you can see, straight up and down. Kim's chest appears to be really compressed, and if she had left that gap at the top, that 1 inch gap at the top, there would have been more room for her to breathe and also a bit more room for movement. To me, it also really doesn't look that good, like, which makes me wonder if that's actually why she had like the death grip on that sweater the whole time. That thing was like a blankie you had as a baby and you just couldn't give it up. And while we might think that the corsets are supposed to shove the girls up to the chin, that was actually not the vibe during the Victorian or Edwardian era. Now in the Regency, yes. Oh yeah, up to the chin. Use them as a table, little shelf, store snacks in them, take a nap on them. Totally a thing, but not in the Victorian or Edwardian eras, okay? The corset should always have the gussets, which support the bosom, made so deep and broad that the bust will not be pushed out of its natural place, almost up to the throat, as we see sometimes. Ooh, yikes. But fall easily to where the bosom ought to be. It is corsets of this kind that are indelicate. So keeping the bust in a natural position with minimal compression is one of the reasons why corsets, when worn correctly, don't affect your breathing. Now, ideally, there was very little pressure there while still being supportive. And what I find fascinating and honestly hilarious about Kim's corset wearing disaster is how she struggled to walk. A weird, awkward gait and difficulty moving is actually noted in the Victorian era about tight lacing, and they comment about how unsightly it is, how ungraceful it is. The corset should fit comfortably over the hips, never compress them. Few of the women of the present day have the free, springy walk of the young Diana. This defect is owing to tight lacing. Nothing injures the grace of the motion so much. So when we look at corsets throughout the Victorian era, we can see that the length of the corset goes up and down over the hip bones at various points in time. But overall, most corsets stop above the hip bones, and that is to allow that freedom of movement. Kim's corset does not do that at all. And that is something I will fault Maison Margiela for. Now, the other reason is because she was wearing absolutely insane shoes.
My shoe. It's clever because if I had a shoe with the heel gets stuck in the metal skirt.
Combining all these factors together, like, quite truthfully, guys, I'm really impressed that she stayed upright the whole time. Part 2, corsets at the Met Gala. Kim wasn't the only person at the Met Gala wearing a corset, not by a long shot. Now, the list I'm about to read off is everyone that I could tell was wearing some sort of obvious corsetry as a part of their look. I can also tell you that I absolutely forgot a couple people on this list. So 99% of the time, if the couture gown has any sort of structured bodice or a large skirt, it is corseted, which makes this list a little tricky. And I struggled with whether or not to include people on here simply because while I was sure there was a bone structure in the garment, I sat on the fence about whether or not it should be included. And so I hope this kind of makes sense. Chloe Sevigny, Gwendolyn Christie, Ashley Graham, Ivy Getty, Ariana Grande, Eve Houston, Lizzo, Benedetta Piccoli, Taraji P. Henson, Demi Lovato, Kylie Jenner, Dua Lipa, Gail Rankin, Lana Del Rey, Divine Joy, Karol G, Aurora James, Natasha Poonawalla, Uma Thurman, Samantha Berry, Ray, Bruna Marquezine, Mona Patel, Tiana Taylor, Elle Fanning, Ugbag Abdi, Conchetta Chiarlo, Gigi Hadid, Sabrina Harrison, Cardi B, Rachel Sennott, Precious Lee, Nicki Minaj, Donatella Versace, Demi Moore, Taylor Russell, Sarah Jessica Parker, Sydney Sweeney, Sabrina Carpenter, and Jennifer Lopez. That's a lot of people. So why the focus on Kim instead of literally everyone else? Yeah, her waist was possibly the smallest. I think Tylo's was actually in real life. But the real point of interest is how much smaller it was than usual, i.e. Kim is obviously tight-laced. So as a historian, I find this juxtaposition of Kim to everyone else at the gala fascinating because it is a modern example of the disparity that occurred between normal corset wearing and tight lacing in the 19th century and people's discourse around it. History is repeating itself on the internet. Being the hilarious hellscape that it is, the internet also has all sorts of jokes about Kim's organs, ribs, and bodily functions happening, which stem back to the equally hilarious and often cringy discourse that occurred around tight lacing and corset wearing.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture.
written predominantly by men in the 19th century. For example, in 1827, Hugh Smith gave an unhinged rant about corsets and tight lacing, comparing the wearing of them to being an alcoholic and participating in, quote, self-murder. And why associate the idea of suicide with that of the habitual drunkard? If intemperance is not a willful, obstinate, deliberate, although sometimes it is true, a protracted destruction of life, an uncalled for termination of existence. Now, in effect, I ask, where is the mighty difference between this disgusting, this brutal vice, and the practice of wearing corsets? You may find the parallel between them much nearer than what you have accustomed yourselves to imagine. He also fully admits in this rant that he doesn't listen to women when they tried to explain to him why they wear corsets. Shocking. I know. He just ignores them and continues with his rant. Perhaps many a one will be ready to say, I don't believe a word of it. How can it be? When so many wear them, I have known many persons who, for years, have laced themselves a great deal tighter than I do and have found no inconvenience from it. It cannot be that corsets are such dangerous things. I have very often heard ladies talk like this, but what then? Even admitting to them to be true, which I would have you remember I do not. You know, I bet you would find the bear versus man in the woods discourse utterly baffling. And he would probably have a 3-hour-long podcast episode about it if he was around today. Hugh's ranting aside, I think that the conversations happening around Kim's tight-laced corset and everyone's collective blind spot to the 40+ other people wearing corsets throughout the night is a great example of, one, how extreme behaviors and practices like tight lacing are not the norm, and two, how they demand the majority of media attention. So when you read anti-corset discourse from the 1800s, the majority of it is, well, one, written by men who refuse to listen to women when discussing corsets like Hugh, and two, it's not actually even about anti-corset, but anti-tight lacing, which is just something that you can do in a corset. In Lectures to Young Ladies, written in 1833 by Almira Phelps, she writes, quote, but although the circumference of the waist may be diminished, the appearance of the whole person, so far from being improved, is much injured by tight lacing. Almira continues a paragraph down with, corsets, when properly worn, are far from meriting the general condemnation which they have received. They may be so made as to prove a support to the body instead of an injury. While it is extremely likely that out of the 40 other corset-wearing celebrities at the Met Gala, there were others who were tightly laced, they just weren't as noticeable as Kim.
Was on my way here, I couldn't breathe, so I needed to lay on the car.
Stop. Oh, because it's so tight.
That happened.
Yes.
Additionally, when padded and worn correctly, the corset can give the desired effect, and tight lacing isn't always needed either, even though it might look like they're tight-laced. Part 3. Kim's corset-wearing rodeo. For the 2019 Met Gala, she wore a look by Mugler with a corset made by Mr. Pearl, which also created a very small-waisted effect. You can see when they're lacing her up, though, for her final fitting, that there is an even 1-inch space in the back. And the dress was carefully fit to go over that exact size of corset, thus preventing her from tight lacing down further, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Because if she had, it would have actually ruined the fit of the dress and the overall effect. In that video, she does joke about not being able to sit down, but also that's because of how low the corset goes with boning over her hips.
But I cannot hardly sit, so...
Yeah, it is a bit too tight down there, but she's obviously chatting, she's talking, she's moving, she's walking, and she just looks a lot more visibly comfortable in that corset than how she appeared in the Maison Margiela look at the gala itself. So her visible discomfort this year, the bad lacing, and the visible strain in the corset, in addition to just the online discourse about how she looked and moved, in my opinion, was not due to a badly made corset. Maison Margiela knows how to make corsets. And it's not even due to her necessarily being inexperienced around corsets. She has worn corsets made by the absolute best of the best.
Mr. Pearl, the best corset maker in the world.
Tighter.
I just think that she made a last-minute dressing decision to go tighter than what was originally intended and advised by the design house in order just to stand out amongst the crowd and to dominate the media cycle. So she's purposefully manipulated her clothing to, in my opinion, the detriment of the house's design and fitting integrity, which, when we're talking couture, is a pretty big damn deal. Further, by everyone focusing on her tightly laced corset, people are also unknowingly perpetuating misunderstandings around traditional corset wearing, even though there were over 40 other people wearing corsets that night, with many of them also wearing Maison Margiela corsetry. Ariana Grande sang, danced, and performed in one, and Gwendolyn Christie was a co-host on the Vogue live stream where she was animated, engaged, energetic, and incredibly dynamic to watch. Like, she was incredible and she looked amazing. She was great. 10 out of 10. Love Gwendolyn Christie.
Yeah, I love how figurative they are. They're really beautiful. And how's it going in cabaret? Now, we talked about this. Eddie, you know we talked about this.
With all of this being said, I do think that this is actually a great example of why some women tight-lace, though. Whether it's a power move, or maybe they're feeling vain or insecure about their body, or in Kim's case, it could have just been all of the above. But it also shows how collectively we as a society instinctively pick up on when someone has corseted down too far and is showing visible signs of discomfort. And that actually makes us uncomfortable. This illustrates that sort of nebulous line that exists with tight lacing. It is different for everyone. Like, there's no exact numerical size that indicates tight lacing. It is completely subjective, and it's actually based on that person's comfort level. So while Kim might like to and can more easily lace down in corsets than other people, like she did in 2019, she was clearly tight laced this year to everyone's discomfort, including us, the viewer. In conclusion, Kim, in an attempt to stay at the top of the headlines, yet again, was frankly a bit of a mess at this year's Met Gala. But on the plus side, at least in this case, the only thing getting hurt instead of a, priceless, one-of-a-kind vintage gown worn at an interesting moment in American history was Kim's ego and maybe her colon, because I have a hard time believing that she wasn't farting up a storm going down that carpet with how tightly that corset was laced. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, then you'll just have to wait for my book to come out, which is still gonna take a couple of years because I'm still writing it. So with that, I would love to know what you all think about the fact that corsetry and artificial hips and padding keep popping up on the red carpet, and also what your thoughts are about Kim's tight lacing choices, though be adults about this. So let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you have to say. I want to give a huge thank you to my Patreon and my YouTube members for your support. I love hanging out with you guys with our live streams and chatting about old clothes, and if you like chatting about old clothes and things like that, consider joining my Patreon. I would love to have you. If not, I post at least once a month, and we love talking about old clothes, fashion history, dress history, and how everything's connected, and that the modern world is not too terribly different from the past, especially when we talk about clothes. So with that, my friends, I'll see you all back here another time with another video. Bye! Okay, before I forget, I really like my outfit today. I decided to be on theme. I hope I don't get demonetized for... I'm covered. Shirt is by Voyage. The corset is a hand-me-down from Nicole. Don't demonetize me! My pants are new this season from Madewell, and they're linen and they're stripes, and I love them. They survived me spilling coffee all over them on a 4-hour drive home through the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. It's not a poopy diaper, I swear. It is just the bulk of my shirt. Subi decided that she needed a hork like right before filming, which was great. I loved that for me. I feel like a cute little, like, almost pirate today.